back to my channel. Today I'm doing my February wrap-up. I read about 10 books in the month of February, and I have lots to talk about, so let's just jump right into it. The first book I read, which I forgot to mention on my February TBR, is After Eden. This is a YA sci-fi book, and it's the first book in a duology. I gave this book 2 stars. I didn't like it very much. This book follows a girl named Eden, who's a regular girl, but she meets this guy named Ryan, who is the new kid at her high school. He doesn't really know a lot of common things that people do know, and Eden suspects that he's not from here. She finds an old journal talking about her best friend. The journal is written years in the future. She suspects that Ryan is from the future. Eden is the only character that I liked. The other side characters were two-dimensional, and there was nothing to them. Ryan was the love interest for Eden in this book, and he didn't really have anything to him except that he was in love with Eden. The only other thing that I did like about this book was the world, but even that was simplistic. Ryan was born on this other planet, but he's fully human, and a certain organization wants to make sure the existence of his planet doesn't happen, or that the planet he's from gets destroyed. I didn't like the plot in this book either. The beginning of the book was really slow and boring, and I found the conclusion to this book to be predictable and just way too convenient. I was planning on reading the sequel, Chasing Stars, but considering the first book was so bad, I chose not to read the sequel. I'm definitely going to unhaul both of these books at some point. The next book I read in February was Slated by Teri. I borrowed this book from the library. This book is a YA dystopian book, and it follows this girl named Kyla. In this world, the government handles terrorist teens by slating them, basically swiping their memories, and giving them a second chance at life by giving them a new family, a new identity, and a whole new personality. Kyla, the main character, has been slated. She has no idea who she is or what her past is, and she's basically just trying to figure out who she is in this first novel. Characters in this society also wear a device called the Levo, and the Levo is like a wristwatch that helps them regulate their emotions so that they don't get too upset or too angry about anything. And if they do get too upset or too angry, they die. We follow the main character, Kyla, shortly after she's been slated. But when Kyla finds herself around other slateds, she realizes that she's different, and she begins having strange dreams that feel like memories of her past life. Kyla is wondering why innocent people keep disappearing, and she wants to figure out why this is happening. This first book reminded me of the Uninvited trilogy by Sophie Jordan, since this book does have a similar premise to that one. I did like the book overall for the mysterious tone when it gave off, but in terms of the plot it was slow and didn't really get action-packed until near the end of the book. I also wanted to mention that there's a love interest between Kyla and a guy named Ben in this book, and I liked the relationship between them. Ben seemed like a nice guy. Overall, I still enjoyed this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I have Fractured by Teri. This is the sequel to Slated. In this book, we find Kyla in between 2 different groups. The Lorders, who are the people in the society that are working for the government slating individuals, and Free UK, the group that's against the government in this society. Ben didn't appear much in this book because of what happened at the end of the last book, which ended on a cliffhanger. Kyla finds herself remembering different identities or different parts of herself. So it was interesting to see her being Kyla as well as some of these other identities. And there was a lot of twists in this book in terms of the plot and some double-crossing. Kyla also has this friend named Cam in the second book. That might not be who he seems to be. Overall, I enjoyed this book, but I did like it less than the first one. This book was really slow and not as mysterious, and didn't really have much happening in it other than Kyla grappling with these different identities and juggling different tasks between these 2 groups, since both groups want to use Kyla for their own ends. Like I said, I did enjoy this book, just not as much as the first one, but I still gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Next I read Shattered, the third and final book in the Slated trilogy. The questions that Kyla has about herself and her society are answered. I liked how this book wrapped up, but I didn't like the relationship aspect of this book. Kyla ends up finding Ben in this book, and she has sort of a pseudo-relationship with him that I didn't really think was believable. However, I did like the conclusion to this book, and the fact that the book hinted that Kyla might choose someone else to be with in the future. I also gave this book 3 stars. Overall, this was a good trilogy, and I'm glad I read it, but it's not something I would necessarily reread. The next book I read was The Immortal Rules by Julie Kagawa. I also borrowed this book from the library. I know in my TBR I said that this book was a YA dystopian book, but it's actually more of a YA post-apocalyptic book. In this society, humans are the second class, and vampires rule in the society. Allie is the main character, and she's always been a drifter on the fringe of society. She's learned to survive with her small group of friends and avoid vampires as much as possible, since she hates them. But when Allie finds food for her group of friends, she gets caught in a situation amongst the vampires, and unfortunately, she turns into the thing that she hates the most, which is a vampire. Now that Allie is a vampire, she has to learn how to be one, and she's taught by this head vampire named Kanan. I liked this book a lot. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. We follow the main character and really get to know who she is. She seems like a strong and kick-ass character. On her travels, she comes across a group of humans that she chooses to travel with, but she's unsure if she should tell them if she's a vampire or not, and she doesn't want to be discovered that she actually is a vampire. And she also has this relationship with this guy named Zeke, who is the head of this traveling group of humans that are just trying to survive and find this place called Eden. Eden is the sanctuary where humans can live without the threat of vampires and just feel free to live their lives. That's what Allie and this group of humans are trying to find through this first book. That's basically what this first book consists of. I liked the main character, Allie. She seemed like a strong and kick-ass female. I also liked Zeke. He seemed to be a sweet guy, and I liked the relationship between them. The plot in this book was really action-packed and really held my attention. I liked it a lot. The next book I read was The Eternity Cure by Julie Kagawa. I also borrowed this book from the library. I won't give too much away since this is a sequel, but I find that this book is a league above the Immortal Rules, and I liked it a lot. I gave this book 4.5 stars, I believe. I liked the dynamic between Allie and Jackal in this book, that evil old vampire who likes to do things his own way, and he's really witty and humorous. I loved him as a character in this book. In the second book, Allie and Jackal are trying to find Kanan, who has been kidnapped by an evil vampire king. The next book I read was The Forever Song. I liked this book a lot less than the previous 2, and I only gave this book 3 stars. This book focused a lot more on the relationship between Allie and Zeke and the different dynamic between them now that certain aspects of their relationship have changed. I liked this book, but I felt that the third book focused on the romance too much, and because of that it slowed the pace down. This third book didn't really have that level of excitement or anticipation like the previous 2 books in the series, which is why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Overall, this was a good trilogy, and I really liked it, but it's not one that I'd necessarily reread. The next 2 books I read were a duology. The first book is Dangerous Hearts by Helen. This book follows the relationship between Lyric Cassidy and her romance with a rock star named Wolf. Lyric Cassidy has recently had her heart broken by a rock star, so when she takes a job as Wolf's road manager, she's determined just to focus on her job and not get sidetracked by relationships or anything else. But that changes when she meets Wolf. There's something about Wolf that captivates her, and Wolf sees Lyric as unique. He also likes her fiery temper. Naturally, a relationship sparks between these 2 characters. I found Lyric to be a strong, relatable character, and I also liked her fiery temper. Lyric and Wolf aren't really sure if their relationship is something casual or something deeper. Lyric has a lot of emotional baggage in her past that she needs to work through. I really liked this first book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. You can tell that there's a lot of tension and angst between these two characters throughout the whole book. I also read the sequel, Destined. I gave this book 3 stars. I really liked this book, but the amount of tension and angst wasn't quite there in this book. The relationship had a sweeter tone to it, now that Lyric and Wolf are finally together. Lyric had to work through her past in order to feel more comfortable with who she is as a person and in her relationship with Wolf. I understood those things, but I found Lyric to be a little too stubborn. I also think that the conclusion to this book and the events leading up to the conclusion were unnecessary. They didn't really fit the story in my opinion. I could have done without those elements in the book. I gave Destined 3 out of 5 stars. I still enjoyed it, just not as much as the first one. Although it's definitely worth reading these books back to back, since the first book ends on a cliffhanger. The last book I read in February was The Lost Hero by Riordan. This is the first book in his Heroes of Olympus series, and this is a YA fantasy series. This book is a sequel series to his Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, and this series focuses on Roman mythology. In this series we have 3 new characters, named Jason, Piper, and Leo, who go on a quest, as well as some familiar faces as well from the previous series. Jason is a really relatable guy who cares a lot about his friends. He's really responsible. He also carries this sadness about him. The world emotionally affects him a lot, even more so since his memory is stolen. Piper is also a strong girl who cares a lot about her friends, but she has to prove herself in this book. Piper is the daughter of Aphrodite, and she doesn't like this because she thinks the majority of Aphrodite's children are shallow and superficial. Then we have Leo, who is the humorous character and silly, but he's also fiercely loyal. Leo thinks he's unimportant to people, and that he doesn't do things as well as Jason does, but he mostly feels inadequate due to his past. I really liked the dynamic and the interactions between these 3 new characters, and the fact that Riordan has expanded in this world with this new series. I really liked the additions and the incorporations of Roman mythology. I also enjoyed the plot in this book and all the twists and turns. But what made this book for me is the character interactions. I can tell that the characters have more depth to them and are more complex than the ones in the previous series, which gives this book more of a YA feel and less of a middle grade feel. I appreciated this. I can also tell that the writing style has greatly improved from the previous series. I also enjoyed the multiple points of view in this book, and multiple points of view is something that we didn't get in the previous series, so I hope that continues throughout the series. We'll see. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely want to read the sequel soon. Those are all of the books that I read in February. Comment down below and tell me what you read this month, or what your favorite read of the month was. If you want to see more videos from me, I'll put some videos on the screen for you guys to check out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next one.